Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fish Tank. I'm BaddestFish80 and we have got a lot to cover today. We're going to be talking about the new Minion Masters upcoming expansion, Torment, and we're going to dive straight in. Okay, here we see the new Minion Masters Torment logo. So this is going to be a brand new expansion that's going to be for 3 whole months. And just a reminder, if you're enjoying the content here, please like and subscribe. Right, okay, so Minion Masters Torment. This is going to be version 1.40. So as mentioned, this is a 3-month expansion. This is the first month of those 3. Right, what do we have? This is dropping on Thursday, the 13th of October. If you're watching this live on YouTube, tomorrow. There's going to be a free DLC. So as always with the expansions, the 3 monthly expansions as a free DLC. It's going to be available from Friday the 14th until the 21st of October. As well as a free DLC, there is also going to be 25% off of the All Masters and Premium Upgrade Pack. So if you're looking to upgrade your Mini Masters experience, that is a great time to do it. Right, 2 new cards. We'll go over them shortly. We're going to see a new skin. It's a banger. There's a Mayhem update, balance changes as always, and a load of bug fixes. Right, let's find out. New cards. Okay, so the first new card, the headline card of this expansion, it's Korrrgoth, Tyrant of Gor'Rakk. This guy is awesome. Right, let's find out more about him. Right, so he's a 10 mana mythic minion. Voidborne, of course, since this expansion is going to be all around the Voidborne faction. So he's got 1000 HP. We'll have a look at how his attack works. The card says he does 150 damage, but his attack effectively does 2 lots of that. Okay, but this is not a simple card. We've got a few things to understand before we can see exactly how he works. Okay, so starts as the Seal of Korrrgoth in your deck. So similar to how Nirvir starts as Nirvir Slumbers, Korrrgoth is going to start as the Seal of Korrrgoth. Now this is a 5 mana card. So what this does, it's a spell, and when you use it, it invokes all Voidborne cards in your hand. But what does invoke do? Well, that's a new keyword. We had a look at it briefly in a previous video, but let's have a look at it in more detail here. So invoke replaces a Voidborne card in your hand with a random Voidborne card that costs 1 more mana until played, but it keeps its current cost. So in simple terms, if you have a 4 mana card, 4 mana Voidborne minion card in your hand, and you invoke it, it becomes a 5 mana Voidborne card, but it only still costs 4 mana. And when we'll check out how this card is played, you'll see that you can invoke a card multiple times and get more and more value. So basically, you're just getting cheaper Voidborne cards. Okay, so he starts as the Seal, and you have to play the Seal twice. You see here, when you've played this card twice, replace it with Korrrgoth. Okay, so you've got to go through your deck cycle twice using the Seal, and then you get access to Korrrgoth. So what does Korrrgoth do? Well, he has a Doomhammer attack. So as you can see in the picture here, he has a giant hammer on a chain. So what he'll do is he'll cast the chain, boom, it does 150 damage, and then he wrenches it back and does another 150 damage. But that's not it. If his attack, either the boom or the bing, does a kill, then it also triggers an invoke, which, as mentioned before, is going to reduce the cost of Voidborne cards effectively in your hand. So the idea of Korrrgoth is you want him within a Voidborne deck, and you want him to be triggering the invoke as often as possible. Now, of course, he is a mythic, which means you can only have 1 of him out at any time, and other things like he can't be destroyed, he can't be rezzed, just general mythic things. Okay, so that's Korrrgoth, Tyrant of the Gor'Rakk, and this is what this guy looks like as an actual unit. So pretty standard but awesome Voidborne art style. Okay, so that's the first of the new cards. As always, we have another new card and another Voidborne minion. This time, the Cowardly Imps. So we went from the huge Korrrgoth now down to the Cowardly Imps. So let's find out about the Cowardly Imps. So this is a 3 mana ranged Voidborne minion. So you get 4 of them. So similar kind of art design style to the Blood Imps. They don't have Blood Pact though, so don't freak out. So, cheap ranged Voidborne minion. They've got the same health as a Blood Imp and the same range as a Crystal Archer. But their kind of little niche is that when a friendly minion dies, they gain fear. And of course, fear, they run away from the target in a straight line. So fear can be kind of, you can understand where they're going to go. Similar kind of mechanic to how Chisma Boomstick fears himself back. This is going to be kind of the same. And we know that that fear can keep them out of harm's way. But also, it needs to be considered when you're dealing with them. You know, where are they going to run to? What have you got to kill them? Okay, so it'll be interesting to see how they fit into some decks and how they work out. And this is what this guy, the Cowardly Imp, looks like in the game. I think this guy looks awesome. Okay, so we'll see that. Okay, so 2 new cards, check. But as always, we get a new skin. And this one, as I mentioned earlier, is awesome. So this is going to be a Valorian skin. And we've seen some skins, we've seen some recolors come and go, which we've not really been particularly enamored by at times. But this one looks badass. So this is the Gor'Rakk Valorian skin. Of course, this is going to be available in the Battle Pass. Remember, the way the Battle Pass works is the new cards are available in either the free or the paid Battle Pass. You'll get them earlier in the paid Battle Pass. The skin, I imagine, is only in the paid Battle Pass. So get those rubies ready. Okay, so 2 new cards and a new skin. Next, Mayhem. So I did cover some of the Mayhem changes in another video in more detail, so check those out if you haven't seen that, but we'll just very quickly gloss over the most important things. So there's a big Mayhem update, so we're going to have 6 new Mayhems added. That's going to be Masters of Misadventure, Relics of Old, Faction Wars, Jinxed, Holograms, and Boss Battle. And as well as some new ones, we're going to have the least popular ones removed. And for the time being, that's Malshar's Malicious Malediction. We've got Fluctuations, Explosive Minions, and Killing Floor. So those are the ones that are being removed. And now, critically, Mayhem is going to be a 2v2 only mode. So no solo Mayhem for the time being. You can do it in randoms or pre-mades, but it must be done in 2v2. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I'm interested to get in and see how it plays out, and we'll see what the feedback is. Remember, always give your feedback on any of these changes. Let the devs know what do you think about them. Check them out. Remember, you can hit escape and go to feedback in the game. You can go to the Discord, Steam forums, wherever you want to leave your feedback. Please do so. But as always, leave the feedback in a respectful and constructive manner. Right, moving on. Reward table has been updated. So the reward table for Mayhem, from the point of view of the in-game content, is much better. The offshoot of that, unfortunately, less rubies. Less meaning none. There's going to be the Mayhem leaderboards added. So I'm not sure how I like this. This is kind of a two-sided thing. I like the leaderboards. It's good to have that challenge, but also if it's showing people's decks, then you potentially end up with the problem we've had with some of the Mayhems before, where there's very, very specific decks that are much stronger than others. But we'll see how that plays out. And there's a retry option added. So if you fail and want to continue and you've got some rubies that you want to throw at it, you can do. Right, Mayhem, check. Next, balance. Right, what do we have? So as always, we're going to look at the buffs and the nerfs and the in-betweens, which are the rebalances where cards are changing completely or in numerous ways, so it's not a simple nerf or a buff. But first we're going to look at the buffs. Okay, first of all, we have a buff here for the Bazooka Scrat. Not seeing too much play, especially since the marked mechanic was changed where it doesn't interact with marked anymore. The health is going to be increased a little bit just to give it more of a chance, I guess, to get to the face and do some damage. Right, we saw this change teased in the blog post earlier in the month. This is Commander Azali. So Commander Azali, remember Azali is the unit while she's alive and unstunned every time you take a bridge. Previously, she would shield everything. Previously, she would shield ground and air. Previously, she shielded ground, but now her shields are going to be shielding a maximum of 10 minions. And a few other costs. And a mana reduction down from 9 to 7 to make her, feel like you can fit her into more decks. Not too much of an investment. The offshoot of that, she's going to have less health, 800 to 650, and damage down from 150 to 125. And as previously mentioned, she's going to shield a maximum of 10 units. Interesting to see how she plays out. We've definitely had metas where she's been completely absent or completely overwhelming. Let's see if this brings her into both a balanced and played form. Right, next up is a very simple change to the Idol of Sacrifice, one of the most recently added cards, just the mana cost down from 5 to 4, just to make it a little easier to use. Now, next up we have Korrrgoth Crystalback. So Korrrgoth Crystalback, of course, when a spell is used, will do damage to the 3 closest enemy units. Previously it was global range, then it was reduced to 14 range, now that is 18 range. Now, to give you an idea, a sniper, just a regular sniper, has a 16 range. So this is a little bit longer range than a sniper. So just a buff there, trying to get more value out of Korrrgoth's ability. And of course, Korrrgoth, one of those cards that was absent and then everywhere and then absent, and then just trying to find that middle ground. Right, next up, Pincer of Dread. Now, a small damage increase for the Pincer of Dread, 100 to 120. Normally when we look at these changes to the damage to spell, we look at what it can kill now that it couldn't previously kill. This doesn't really change anything, apart from the fact that you can now trigger it more often, the kill effect on things that are damaged. They don't have to be quite so damaged. Right, next up, Rampant Growth. Okay, again, one of the newer cards, hasn't seen much play, getting a little buff here. So the heal that it's going to do per shroom, remember when you play it, all of the friendly shrooms go to your target and they will heal it, they will give it giant growth if it's a Zenshi minion, and they'll stun stuff around it and do a little knockback. So each shroom is going to heal for 100 instead of 75, so a little buff there. Interesting change here to the Zap Shrine. Zap Shrine previously was all about the stun. Now it's going to do a little bit of damage. Now it's going to do 25 damage per zap. Now, it's important to know that this is just the direct single target closest enemy zap, not the AoE zap that it does with the Zenshi flow. That's still going to stun everything but not do damage to everything. So it's not going to be a huge AoE damage, even though it's a small amount. So that's just going to be a single target, just a small buff for the Zap Shrine. Okay, so that's the buffs. Now we're going to look at the rebalances. As mentioned, rebalances are things that are changing in multiple ways or entirely. So the first change we have is to King Puff. Very strong master, very strong perk 3. So we've got some changes. So first of all, the birthday cooldown. Now, all of King Puff's abilities trigger around the birthday. Now, the birthday cooldown is going to be up from 43 seconds to 45 seconds. So that gives you your perk 1, your bridge switch, your perk 2, your buffs, and effectively influence your perk 3 as well. Of course, you can reduce that by playing your cards, but it's going to slow that down a little bit. Okay, so that's one change. The second change is the perk 2. The perk 2 currently is where you get the rage or the shield puffs, where you can pick them up and get that buff. So there's going to be some added buffs to that. So instead of always having a rage or a shield, you're going to get 2 out of 5 options. That's going to be rage and shield still. There's also going to be one that gives 2 spirits to the closest minions. There's one that gives 2 night puffs, and there's one that gives you a random 2 mana spell. And just for completion, 2 mana spells are Bridge Buddies, Frost Forever Flyby, Glen's Brew, Impetus Blast, Rampage, Shock Rock, Simulacrum, and Snap Freeze, and hopefully I didn't miss any. Okay, so those are going to be the ones that you get. I think we're not entirely sure how it's going to work. I think maybe the order of the 5 buffs is set at the start of the game and then it cycles through them, but we'll see when we get a chance to get hands-on with it. Okay, and perk 3 night puffs, that's going to have the damage reduced a little bit from 50 to 40. So that's only a small damage, but of course it's quite a big change because they can no longer single shot the little skeletons, so they're going to be far more inefficient at dealing with that kind of horde. And also when you do the bridge switch and you get 5 of them and then they all shoot at one time, that damage is of course going to go down from 250 to 200. So that's also quite a big thing because it can no longer single shot things like a Harbinger or an ATG drone. So night puffs are going to be less efficient. So we'll see how that works out. Okay, so that was a change, a rebalance to King Puff the Master. Let's have a look at some card rebalances here. Okay, so we've got Dragon Nest. Dragon Nest's seen a lot of changes, and there's some more. So Dragon's Nest duration going up from 30 seconds to 45 seconds. Spawn rate going up from 5.8 seconds to 8.7 seconds. Seems kind of random numbers, but they're chosen for a reason. So you're still going to get 5 spawn cycles. Remember, the Dragon's Nest is effectively Flightless Dragon spawner. You get an extra Flightless Dragon if you use a spell between the cycles. One of the reasons they chose 8.7 seconds is that you can't use Call to Arms to get an extra spawn. So, strange numbers, but they make sense. Right, next up. Again, this is one that was teased earlier in the blog post. So, a big change to Glen's Brew. So, Glen's Brew was a card, a spell that was used in very niche circumstances and very, very strong. You'd find it used on a Setsu, a Battle Shihao, a Fergus, and similar high DPS AoE units like that. So it's going to be changed. So remember, when you used to Glen's Brew a target, it would disappear when the brew was over. That's going to change. Right, so what it's going to do now, it's going to freeze a friendly minion. So the freeze is going to last for 3 seconds. Whilst it's frozen, it can no longer attack, but it will take half damage. Over that 3 seconds, you will heal it for 200, and it will trigger Revelry if it's a Stoutheart card with the Revelry mechanic. So of course the Revelry is something like the Caber Tosser gets a new Caber to toss, things like that. So Glen's Brew changing a lot. Be interesting to see how people use it. So it's no longer going to be removing cards when they've when the Glen's Brew finishes. So you can use it on a lot more different things. Someone suggested to me, and I might regret mentioning this, but something like using it to allow cheap and weak units to survive through spells. So for example, a Priestess getting spelled, lots of spells can kill the Priestess. A Glen's Brew could allow her, depending on what spell it is, to survive through the spell. So we'll see how that works out. But interesting to see how people use it and what case scenarios it is best used in. Right, next up, we've got a rebalance to the Lash of Armoon. So this is the spell that triggers the spirit effectively of the Armoon, which does 2 attacks. Now this is a very strong spell. The only thing about this spell is it's quite a skillful spell, because you do need to think about where you're going to play it, what's going to aggro and stuff like that. So while there is quite a good skill ceiling, but it is very powerful. Does 2 lots of 200 damage. That's 400 damage you can get out. So that's a very powerful spell. So mana cost going up from 5 to 6. Slitherbound going up from 2 to 3. So that you could argue in some scenarios the extra Slitherbound is going to make up for the mana cost, especially if you're using it in a deck with sacrifices. But outside of sacrifices, it's definitely going to be a little bit more expensive. Okay, next up, Nirvir the Fallen. So we've got some changes here to Nirvir. Firstly, the health is being reduced from 2,000 to 1,800. So remember, Nirvir is the dragon that you get from Morelia's perk 3. You can also get it from the Nirvir the Fallen card. So health going down from 2,000 to 1,800. Now, the damage is going down from 320 to 240, but the attack cooldown is going down from 8 seconds to 6 seconds. So if you do the maths, the DPS is still the same. So what does that mean? Well, firstly, she's not going to be able to kill so much in an entire breath. So things like a Bara or a Cursebearer, things of that sort of stature, will not die in a single breath. But because the attack cooldown is less, one of the ways of easily dealing with the Nirvir is just to keep it aggroed with something cheap whilst your DPS is behind it. But if her attack cooldown is shorter, then that means you're going to have to work harder to keep her aggroed. You're going to have to do something every 6 seconds instead of every 8 seconds. So some changes there for Nirvir. Be interesting to see how they actually fall when people use them. But we'll see. We'll see. And then moving on from Nirvir to the other giant dragon, Rimmergal. So Rimmergal is receiving some changes here. Now, Rimmergal, remember, once Rimmergal enters your hand, it freezes all of the minions in your hand. So that means if you spawn a minion, it will start frozen. And then that mana that you spent on that minion will count towards the defrost. Previously, she would freeze your entire hand, all of the minions. Now, she's only going to freeze the closest 2 slots. So if you draw Rimmergall in your first slot, then your second and third slot will be frozen. The fourth slot will be available for use as normal. The offshoot of that is the unfrozen slots will not count to the defrost, but the defrost is being reduced from 35 to 25. So you only need to spend 25 mana on the frozen minions to defrost Rimmergall. And the fact that you don't have all of the slots frozen means you don't get so impacted whilst you're in the early game when you're trying to spawn something and everything's frozen and you can't do anything for a while. Okay, so I think that's a healthy change for Rimmergall, and we'll see if that sees more play. Okay, so that's all of the rebalances. Now we get into the nerfs. And the nerfs often are where people are most interested in seeing what's going to happen, because they want to see the cards that have been dominating the meta, especially if they haven't been using them. They want to see them getting hit by the nerf bats, and some of them are. Feng the Wanderer, one of the newer cards, one of the strongest cards, especially when wildcarded. We've seen that a lot. Of course, Feng is the monkey that gets the buffs based on what factions you have in your hand. So Feng, firstly, mana cost is going up from 5 to 6. So that's a good change. I like that. And of course, if you're wildcarding it, you're going to feel that nerf multiple times. Health is going down from 420 to 400. As we see, this is shared with all of the other similar monkeys. The important part of the nerf for Feng, though, is less health means less health buffed when receiving spirits and giant growth. So on paper, there's some nice nerfs there, and then when we consider the buffs you could get from the Accursed or the Zenshi cards, then that that nerf actually is a bigger nerf going forward. Okay, so Feng the Wanderer, some good changes there. We'll see how that affects how much we see Feng in the meta. Right, next up, we've seen some changes recently to the Grenadier. So the Grenadier is one of the strongest 2-mana cards in the game. We always see this. We always see potential bans in tournaments with this card because it's so strong for what it does, and there's not really much that removes that can replace it. So damage going down from 40 to 30. So it's no longer going to single shots and things like Slitherbounds or Crystal Archers. So there's a few scenarios where it's not going to trade quite so well. And of course, if it's attacking multiple times, then the damage is the nerf is being felt multiple times. So small Grenadier nerf, is it going to change things? Probably not too much. It's not going to be as effective, but there's still nothing that really does what it does. Of course, you've got things like the Rocket Scrap, but not really the same kind of thing. Right, next up is another card that's been very meta. This is the Rabid Prowler. So the Rabid Prowler, it's the Prowler, and if you trigger it with the Sacrifice, which was previously one Slitherbound being sacrificed, it got Berserker Rage, which is 100% extra damage. So slight change here. You're going to need 2 Slitherbounds to sacrifice to trigger the Rage. So it puts some additional restrictions on your deck building to make sure you've got enough Slithers there, and of course you need to play it in a way that gets that trigger as often as possible, which again means you're going to have to play the deck slightly differently. Make sure you've got those 2 Slitherbinds bounds instead of just 1. So we'll see how that changes. But of course, once it is triggered, it's exactly the same as it is before, and it's an absolute monster. Okay, next up, Rimmergall's Breath. We saw some changes to Rimmergall. This is Rimmergall's Breath, the spell. So damage going down from 180 to 150. So that's important in terms of it's no longer going to kill Boombuggy, Laylail, Veilstalker, Blast, and Spirit Monster. So there's a number of important units it won't kill. Master damage going down from 20 to 15. So just reduced efficiency there on the master damage. The figures look a bit skewed there because I think there was a nerf that was to the damage previously, but the master damage didn't get nerfed, so the figures didn't quite match up, but now they shall. So basically 10% damage to face. As mentioned earlier when we were talking about the Grenadier, the Rocket Scrap, one of the newer cards, very strong card, can put out a lot of damage on a lot of small units and get a lot of value. So the change here, remember, so the way the Rocket Scrap works is it will launch itself at nearby enemies, damaging both itself and the enemies. But because it has a barrel shield, the first time it damages itself, the barrel shield will soak that damage. So if it's not getting attacked, it can put out 2 lots of this 100 damage AoE. So that's not changing. What is changing is it can no longer grab the bridge on its second jump. So its second jump is kind of a suicide jump because it's if it hasn't been given a shield or anything like that, it's going to die from the second jump. So the change here is it's no longer going to grab the bridge on the second jump. So it's still going to be able to put out the same amount of damage, but it's not going to be as efficient when grabbing the bridges. I think that's a healthy change. Okay, as mentioned with the Feng nerf, a lot of the Shihao monkeys are getting the health nerf as well. Health down from 420 to 400. We've seen some very strong Zenshi based decks. So the Shihao family, this is going to include the Shihaos that you get from the Jadespark Watchers, the Tranquil Shihao, as we see here in the picture, the Battle Shihao, and the Windwalker Shihao. They're all going to have a little bit less HP. Next up is a change to the Spirit mechanic. So remember, Spirit gives a unit extra health, and the extra health it gives is based on the health of the unit that we're discussing. So the extra health is going down from 50% to 40% of max health, but it's still going to be between a minimum of 50 and a maximum of 400. So in some cases this will give you less of a buff, in other cases it's not really going to make much of a difference. Right, next up is the Reckinator, Reckinator 9000. So no longer able to heal during the self-destruct. So I think that's quite important when we consider the changes to the Glenn's Brew. So you can no longer heal, whilst you will be able to Glenn's Brew the Reckinator, and you will be able to freeze it, which means that it'll take half damage. It will no longer heal during that. So we've seen a lot of strats, people throwing heal balls at the Reckinator, people Glenn's Brewing it before the change, all those kind of things where you're basically just trying to keep the Reckinator alive while it's self-destructing to get that big AoE explosion on your opponent. But it's going to be more difficult to do that. Okay, so that's the balance taken care of. Next up we have some bug fixes. And let me tell you, we've got a lot of bug fixes. And I've just realised my screen's kind of small. I don't even know if I can read all these. Let's see if we can make this a bit bigger. There we go. Nice. Okay, we're going to rush through these quickly because there's a lot of them. Here we go.
Okay, linked queue time estimating to ELO, linked to ELO rather than rank. So when you're being given a queue time, your estimated queue, previously it was linked to rank, which is kind of irrelevant. Now it's going to be linked to your ELO. Right, fixed AFK bot toggle, not working correctly. Fixed a couple of issues related to setting and saving resolution in the settings menu. Applied the same restriction to repeatedly getting the same teammate in randoms as the restriction on repeatedly getting the same teammate, which was already implemented in all modes. Fixed an issue where a player could enter a state where he would not be able to create lobbies. Fixed several issues related to the in-game bug reporting tool. Fixed a bug where Zip Sapinator would do more damage than intended. Fixed a bug where Yahoo would attack multiple times in quick succession. Fixed an issue where Azog would shadow dash twice. Fixed an issue where Frostbearer would freeze itself and friendly units after being stolen by a ghost. Made Coke stop attacking when frozen. Made both Nirvir and Rimagal respect being frozen and stopping their attacks. Barrel shields now correctly take 50% damage, reduced while frozen. Frostbearer's frozen aura now correctly applies slow. Fixed Frostbearer losing his aura when consumed by a black hole. Fixed stuns getting cleared when a unit got unfrozen. Arcane Golem now properly gets frozen by Rimagal's permafrost effect. Fixed an issue where Tranquil Shihao would be unable to move after a combination of stuns and roots while healing. Fixed black hole leaving behind certain visual effects. Fixed audio issues when selecting Valorian in master selection menu. Fixed cards occasionally rotating when being promoted. Fixed frost feathers on a flyby, being unable to resist the gravitational pull of a black hole. Fixed a weird interaction between Frost Feathers and Arcane Ring that would cause the Arcane Ring spin animation to break. Fixed an issue where an Arcane Ring on a unit stolen by a ghost would change rotation direction visually, but mechanically would continue rotating in the same direction, leading to a mismatch between the mechanics and the visuals. Fixed an issue where Mardred's attack animation would break. Fixed an animation issue where Zealots of the Burning Fist would continue attacking into the air. Fixed model and animation issues with both Feng the Wanderer and Taluk the Vessel. Idol of Sacrifice removed from the random pool. Fixed a bug where the Squire Puff relic was spawning puffs in the same position, regardless of which bridge was captured. Marked units that get stolen by ghosts will no longer continue being attacked through the marked debuff. Fixed issues relating to Coax the Diplomancer and the Veilstalker's avatars, icons. Gor'Rakk Gate now has proper card buff tooltips for all options. Fixed the rarity of the Poltergeist Morelia skin. Fixed many various localization issues, especially with Chinese translations. We did it.
Woo! Okay, so that's the bug fixes. And that is Torment. Minion Masters Torment version 1.40. So, let's just quickly recover what we just went over. Okay, Thursday the 13th of October. Free DLC, discounts on the upgrade packs. New cards, which is the Korrrgoth, the Tyrant of Gor'Rakk, and the Cowardly Imps. We've got the new awesome-looking Gor'Rakk Valorian skin. We've got a bunch of new Mayhems and stuff. We've got a load of balance changes, and we've got a ton of bug fixes. Guys, we did it. We covered a lot. but we got through there probably in record time. So thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope you're as excited for Torment as I am. Remember, if you're liking the content here in the fish tank, make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll look forward to seeing you again out there on the battlefield and again here in the fish tank soon. My name's BadAsFish80, and I'll see you soon. Take care and goodbye.